Okay, I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, August 28th, 2018. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Benford. Fuqua. Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Marquis.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Sargent.
Here.
Okay, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, August 28th, 2018. Laura, would you please call the roll?
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. So as always, we're going to start out the evening with the superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson.
Board President Marquis, members of the board, it's great to be here again for my second meeting. The last time we had a chance to meet, we were talking about the beginning of school. I'm proud to report we had a great first 2 weeks of school. Wanted to thank all of our teachers, staff, leaders for making sure that we had a great start. Our parents and students as well. They've done a great job coming to school ready to learn. I want to spend a special thanks to those that helped us at Eisenhower Elementary School. As we shared at our last board meeting, we had some challenges in getting that school open on time. And it's always great when you have challenges as an organization. You see people step up in big ways. And so a lot of our people here, our team here at the central office went out both Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to help open Eisenhower on time. Their teachers were wonderful, and were able to open on the Monday after the original start of school, and just want to thank everybody who pitched in and made that happen. So I have been out and about in the district over the past couple of weeks. I've been to 25 schools, and I've started my engagement as part of my 100-day plan, and I've just been so pleased to be able to talk to teachers, staff members, leaders, about some of the things that they are seeing and getting their feedback, and it's just been really wonderful. I also would like to thank the board for a great retreat that we had last Tuesday, where we talked a lot about working as a team and coming up with working agreements to make sure we're communicating and doing the things we need to for the students in this district. So I just wanted to thank you all publicly. I really appreciated that. And then finally, we'll have some interesting information to share this evening in regards to our state accreditation. We have been named accredited with distinction. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I think there's some great data to share and some opportunities for us to grow as well. But I'm really excited and want to congratulate all of the students in our district, the parents, our teachers, and leaders for doing a great job. So that's my update.
Okay, thank you so much. Board members, do you have any questions or comments for Rob on the report? Okay, so hearing none, we'll move on to our next item, which is public hearing and public participation. Okay, so the board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking to non-agenda items. Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. I don't think that'll be the case this evening. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K through 12 students. There is a lighting system on the podium, starting at green when your 2 minutes starts, turning to yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and turning to red at the end. When the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from the maximum number of speakers. Okay, so we do not have any speakers on agenda items, so we'll go straight to non-agenda items, starting with some students. Okay, and let's see, we're going to start with Olivia Blake.
8th grader currently attending Aspen Creek Pre-K through 8, although I have not been going because a student has been bullying me. Yesterday I was curious to see if they had put any grades in for the first 2 days I was at school and for all of the days that I had missed. When I looked on Infinite Campus, I saw all U's. It made me more mad than I ever was within this whole situation. I had so many emotions fly through at the speed of light. I have never been so mad at administration. They should be keeping the student home instead of me. I ask myself the same rhetorical questions each day. Why do I have to miss school and the bully gets to go? Why do I as a victim have to face consequences such as staying home from school because of the bully's actions? Why did administration try to make things better by talking to students, throwing years' worth of strong friendships away? No one is willing to answer these questions. Something else that is a worry for me is that the teachers will be mad and not enjoy me in class. I enjoy all of the teachers at the school and love all my classes and going to learn, but the bully is making this so much harder. The truth is, I used to be a very happy kid, but this whole situation has made me a little depressed and sad. I hope that I can return to school soon, but based on the job that administration is doing, I believe I cannot. I do not feel safe at school. I do not enjoy school, and when administration tried to fix the situation, that was the worst. All I feel is isolation.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Isabel Blake.
I go to Aspen Creek with my sister, but my sister is not going to school because she is being bullied. The school did not fix the issue because she promised to keep my sister and the other student away from each other because the other student spread personal and mean rumors, took away her friends, called her retarded and other mean names and glared at her. And the school did not do anything. I am worried that when my sister is at school, the student is going to hurt my sister badly. It was not fair that my sister had to be worried and disappointed that she couldn't go to school while the bully is at school bullying other kids.
Thank you. Andrea Blake, who was given 2 minutes by Yale Cohen.
Okay,
Correct?
I'm going to use this key to go down, except that it's, hold on a second.
Last school year, I learned that my daughter was being bullied by another student. This had been going on for quite some time before my daughter finally broke down and told me what was happening. My daughter has a disability, and the majority of the bullying specifically targeted that. Talking about upsetting or negative situations has always been something she has struggled with. In fact, that has been an IEP goal of hers for many years. As difficult as it was, my daughter reported the bullying to school administration. They began the investigation process. Unfortunately, the bullying did not stop, and it actually increased both in intensity and frequency. It was heartbreaking to see my once dedicated and hardworking daughter's grades fall from a 3.7 GPA to a 2.8. Focusing on fear of more physical and emotional harm at school, she basically stopped accessing her education. She began to give up all school-sponsored activities she once enjoyed in order to avoid the other student. The bullying by the same student picked up right where it left off when the current school year started. With my daughter unsafe and fearful at school, and the school not coming up with a satisfactory response, Olivia's special education advocate elevated concerns to a district level. However, despite the school, district, and special education administrations, no credible plan which can truly keep my daughter safe is yet in place. Therefore, she cannot attend school. She has now missed 7 out of 9 days this year. Watching your child suffer from being the victim of bullying is very difficult. As if this weren't enough, the process in which reports of bullying have been investigated last spring and this fall have further damaged my daughter emotionally and cost her years of friendships and years of, years of hard work and friendships. These investigations include calling my and many other students to get information on if they witnessed bullying behavior occur. Sadly, the majority of middle school students are apparently not willing to tell on a peer, particularly when that peer may target them as well. Some students approached my daughter angry that they had been dragged into the situation. Others just avoided her from then on. One of the reasons we know that others witnessed the bullying is that I received calls from several moms of those youngsters telling me their kids have told them that my daughter was being treated horribly. With no one willing to collaborate the bullying to school administration, it again became one student's word against another, and the school told us that it was limited on what they could do. With no consequences for the bully and her being fueled with anger over my daughter going to school officials, the bullying has become worse than I could have imagined. The bully was empowered by getting away with what she was doing, and physical bullying began. By this point, the investigations basically cost my daughter all of her friendships she had, all of the progress she had made over the past 7 years on working on telling and reporting were lost. One of the scariest things you can hear as a parent is, "I don't care what happens to me, I'm never going to tell again." I want nothing more for my daughter to be able to return to school safely and be able to access her education. Sadly, if and when this occurs, she will be without friends, without a trusting relationship with school staff, and emotionally scarred by the very process that was supposed to protect her. My daughter's school takes part in the No Place for Hate campaign, and while I agree that the programs that discourage bullying are good, many do not address in any way how to help support kids in reporting when they have witnessed bullying, nor of what to do if you are the one being bullied, except to tell. It would be nice to live in a world where bullying doesn't exist, but until that happens, I would like to see BVSD address the process in which it handles reports of bullying. What has happened to my daughter is sadly the outcome for the majority of kids who are bullied. Tomorrow, there is an IEP meeting to look at what services can be changed, but will not put her safely back into school. Dr. Anderson has been aware of the situation for at least a few days. Everyone is trying, but there are still no answers yet. I am asking all of you for your help. Thank you.
Okay. Kate Durr, and you've been given an additional 2 minutes from Kelly Garcia.
My name is Kate Durr. I'm a parent up in Nederland. I have a 4th grader and a 7th grader. And I am speaking on behalf of a parents group. On Sunday, we formulated a letter to be presented here. Throughout the last school year, our then 3rd grade students experienced numerous violent events within their school, their classroom, and the playground, including stabbings, chokings, hitting, and kicking. Repetitive punching. Overall, the environment is chaos in both of the classrooms. Individual parents met with the principal and the 3rd grade teachers many times last year and had been assured that protocols and policies would be put in place to support our kids as well as the kids that were perpetrating this. That unfortunately did not come to fruition this fall. We began this year, we were hopeful that things would be different, but last Tuesday, one of the children had a violent outburst. There were books being thrown, screaming, and a backpack. 2 kids were injured. There was no response from the school about what had happened, no communication, which was also what occurred last year. Absolutely no communication if your child was injured, no communication as to what they're putting in place. Unfortunately for my son, it happened in his class, and he said to me, "I have never seen anybody rage like that in my life." He then came up with a plan on his own. If this kid brings a knife to school, what he will do. To say that's unacceptable is putting it mildly. For a 9-year-old to face a chaotic situation every day They cannot learn. They cannot focus. They are in a known environment where at any moment, things could change. This isn't random. It's a known threat that the principal is not taking action on. So what we are asking is, what is the district's policy on this? On the website, it's very clear as to violence, suspension, expulsion. None of that has occurred. Nothing was even said on Wednesday in the classroom about, let's talk about this. These are our standards. Nothing, as if it never happened, and that was what occurred last year. As if these kids don't know what happened. No communication with the parents as to, this is our plan, this is what we're implementing. We have 3 students that are perpetrating these acts. To hear that on the playground, my son was punched in the ribs, that he self-splinted for 4 days. I was never contacted by the school. It wasn't until days later when he was then punched in the back that he notified me. These were not just isolated incidences. These were weekly basis. So as a parents group, we are asking the district to please get involved, that it appears to be willful negligence on the administration's part at Netherland Elementary School. And our kids cannot continue to be in this type of environment. We would like to know what your response is and what the plan is immediately, because our kids are not safe, they can't learn.
Okay, Anna Segura?
Hello. The proposed JS student use of the internet policy states that the district isn't responsible for any damages, losses, or costs a student suffers using the internet and electronic communications. District technology resources is at the student's own risk. I do not have to sign a liability waiver for my child to play on the playground, to eat at the BVSD cafeteria, and I don't understand why school technology should be any different. In the last meeting, Member Fuqua asked the CIO more about what the risks were if we didn't approve the technology policies for staff and student. Mr. Moore's response is telling for what he said as well as what he didn't say. Mr. Moore said the risks were that the district would be vulnerable to viral attacks from thumb drives, risk to school property. What Mr. Moore didn't mention were the risks to students, nor do these risks appear anywhere in the technology policy or approach. So let's talk about some of the real risks and vulnerabilities. All of these are real examples of things that happened to BVSD students. The risk that a second grade student researching products for her school market day comes across an erotic image of male genitalia while trying to find images of stress balls. She reports feeling guilty and dirty afterwards. The risk that a high school student who was raped her freshman year is forced to relive her rape on a daily basis through cyberbullying on social media every day while at school. The risk that a high school student is unable to concentrate in class because his classmate's playing Fortnite. The risk that a 4th grade elementary student looks up lyrics of a song that he heard on the radio, only to find out that the radio plays a clean version, while at BVSD, he can find the explicit lyrics on his computer. The risk that a 4th grade female is using chat programs to communicate with an 8th grade boy without her parents' knowledge or supervision. These are some of the real vulnerabilities and risks, and ultimately are the ones that Mr. Moore should be thinking of as much or more than the risk to his property. Property can be replaced, but students can't undo these experiences.
Okay, Florence Bouquet?
Hi. So I'm going to continue to talk about the risks affecting students, the next generation, when given a Chromebook versus an object actually to study. So my kids, instead of reading a book, we give them a Chromebook and read the book online. Same for counting coins and whatnot. I mean, we could definitely do that with hands-on activities. The screen time that we have in school is tremendously expensive. I mean, I just talked with my third grader teacher 2 days ago, and she said that sometimes she will use 80 to 90% of the time the Chromebook to do literacy, to do math, and this is unacceptable. Yesterday, I actually saw a doctor, pediatrician, and she asked me, how much screen time do you give your kiddos? And I'm like, well, they spend 6 hours at school, and most of this, 90% of the time, has screen time. So while I can actually try to control this on my end at home, I cannot control that at school, and this is unacceptable. As you know, the screen time is negative on the kids' learning and growth. It affects the brain development, the connectivity to the screen as the kids are addicted, having a screen, and all that they do on the computer instead of having book, paper, pencil. They also think and process differently the information, and differently, I mean, the analytical thinking is different because it's based on visual cues just for the computer versus when you have a book, pencil, and paper, you have much more critical thinking and problem solving. So I don't see where having a Chromebook in the classroom is really educative. As you know, the addiction to computer, you know, even iPhones, iPads, all of that is negative. The screen time, you know, just like the doctors ask you, you know, how much screen time you're getting is negative. So I feel like the school is definitely becoming a 5-hour screen time through games to learn. And it's basically, you know, 20 minutes of lunch, 30 minutes of playtime, and basically sit and watch your screen for 5 hours. So this is not acceptable. We are creating people that are morally not good and healthy and not educated. Thank you.
Carrie White?
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Carrie White. I have a student at Uni Hill Elementary School, and who will next year be in middle school. And I've heard that there is some thought that parents within the district don't have, those that have concerns about technology are in the minority. And so, you know, I felt it important, as other parents have tonight, to continue to come to the board meetings to bring attention to that. And I do have many concerns, such as data collection of minors, access to inappropriate content, overall too much screen time. I did want to focus my comments tonight on distracted learning. The entire country of France has banned devices that are connected to the internet. And I think more and more you can read research on how distracted kids are. And I think that since I have become more aware within the last year, I've seen some positive steps that the district has taken, and I do appreciate that. But I'm going to bring up the idea of a ban on smartphones. It doesn't mean a ban on phones. There are many phones that you can still get that are not connected to the internet. But a ban on smartphones is respectful to students who genuinely want to learn. It improves academic success. I think schools all over the United States is showing this. And it provides a more equitable school environment. One of my concerns is that I did receive the new BVSD digital communication scaffolding, and that social media, which is, you have to be 13 to even use that, is still allowed in our middle school. And I've read a lot that when kids are on their phones or on their technology, such as a Chromebook, that a lot of their time is spent on social media. So I would just encourage, especially with the new launch of the Web to One, that the board takes careful consideration with everything technology, because I think it's really important to our students' learning. Thank you.
Kelly Lopez?
Hi, I'm Kelly. I have a daughter who's in 4th grade, and this is my 3rd year now coming to talk about technology. I'm getting kind of tired of coming here and talking about it, but I'm here again. And what I want to talk to you about tonight is FERPA, and specifically who is the designated school official or officials for the Boulder Valley School District. I've asked the question a couple times. I've asked it in a Cora. I also filed a KE-R complaint about different technology issues, and one of them was wanting to know who is the school official. I'm concerned about our kids' personal identification or identifiable information, who it's being shared with, where it's ending up. And according to FERPA, and I've made copies for all of you, regarding this law, the right to be informed, for parents to be informed of who the school official is or other third parties with a legitimate educational interest to whom the school district intends to disclose personally identifiable information without parental consent. I'm not sure if I read that correctly, but we're supposed to be informed about FERPA, who has access to our kids' information, what they're doing with it, and as far as I can tell, unless someone can tell me differently, I've never been notified of that. And under this law, we're supposed to be notified. So I'd like you guys to all just take a look at this and let us know who the school official or officials are, what information they have, and what they're doing with it. So can I just pass it out?
Give it to Laura. Okay, and our next speaker is Teresa Anton.
Hi, good evening. My name's Teresa Anton. I'm a mother of 3 boys, 2 who attend community Montessori, and I'm an East Boulder County resident. I live in Lafayette, and I'm here to talk about a relatively light topic of the new policy by the Transportation Department concerning preschool students on the bus. And I'm asking that the board maybe consider granting an exception for focus schools. First, I just want to point out that the applications for space available bus spots were provided online July 1st. The website had absolutely no information or even indication of a change in policy for preschool students being allowed to ride the bus. If I had known in July 1st that my children would not be able to ride the bus together, that there would be no chance, I probably would not have enrolled him in a BVSD school at that point. Would have kept him close by. I'm a small business owner. I have a toddler. I have an aging parent that lives with me. Spending 2 hours of my day traveling back and forth to pick up my preschooler at school seems a little excessive, especially considering that the bus is already running at our school. There are several scholarship students riding the bus, and in fact, today I witnessed one scholarship student get onto the bus by themselves, giant bus, and the bus took off. And here I am with several other parents who have siblings who ride the bus. One got on the bus, one didn't, and here we're driving back and forth all of these hours every single day when we know there's space available. We understand that the reasoning is said to be money, but I feel like if it's really a concern about money, why aren't we using the facility, using the service that's already being provided? Why is it sitting there empty? And it just doesn't make sense if we're trying to be a green district, that we're forcing parents of preschool students to drive. For me, it's 9 miles each direction, 26 minutes each way for 3 hours of school. I just ask that you consider an exemption for focus schools like community Montessori. It'd be really greatly appreciated by your parents. Thank you.
Nancy Kress.
I'm here to express my concern regarding lack of communication on the part of the Netherland Elementary School administration with regard to school safety and adequate support for students who are known to have violent outbursts. When numerous parents requested that the school hold a meeting that would be open to all parents of then third graders last year, the school did not respond. Instead, We received communication that students were being coached to share the positive things that were happening in their classrooms and to avoid dwelling on the negative. I have a 4th grade son who is close friends with 2 students who have behaved violently toward others, including stabbing classmates with pencils and placing classmates in chokeholds. My son has frequently chosen to place himself in the position of de-escalating violent situations on the playground, both out of concern for the safety of classmates and also because he genuinely cares about the kids who were behaving in threatening ways. He has also been repeatedly pulled from class to talk to the principal about events that occurred involving his friends. These classmates are his friends, but it is not my 9-year-old son's responsibility to monitor the behavior and safety of his classmates. My kids previously attended a school in which a friend who had violent outbursts was almost entirely removed from the classroom for one-to-one instruction. This was highly detrimental to that child's opportunities to learn. I am tremendously grateful that NES has taken the approach of keeping all students in the classroom where they can all learn in community with each other. However, there has to be a middle ground between removing students who have violent outbursts and allowing the outbursts to continue threatening their peers. A qualified professional who is trained in managing such challenging situations in ways that result in positive outcomes needs to be present in these classrooms at all times. Thank you.
Jessica Fitzer, who was given an additional 2 minutes from Natasha Jaffe.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Fitzer. I am here representing parents also from Netherland Elementary regarding the violent outbursts that have been occurring in our school. I want to make it very clear to this group that my goal, my personal goal, is to bring stability and safety to all of our children, each one of them. I am in no way looking for a particular child to be made a martyr or to be discriminated against. All of our children deserve the best for what each of them needs, for each of their individual needs. Our school is failing our children on multiple levels, and it is the children who, not just the children who are getting hurt, but the children who are hurting others that need help too. I am not on a witch hunt. I am not against any particular student, and I am not for the removal of children unless it is for violently hurting themselves or hurting others. I believe that consequences are a moral compass for which our tiny little humans will become thriving adults. And Netherland Elementary is not providing consequences to provide children to make that moral compass decision within themselves. At least that's my personal opinion. To say this easily, to say this bluntly, it is not easy right now. It is not about singling out children. It's about violence, the stabbings, chokings, repetitive punching. So our question is, what is the district's stance on all of this? Sorry, I have to work off my cell phone here. Earlier, it was mentioned that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging and meaningful and engaging learning opportunities. What does the district do when that is not occurring? What do they do when violence occurs? When does the district get involved on the school level to make it safe for our children? That's what we want to know, because we want to send our kids to school. Our kids want to learn, but they're scared. They're confused, and they're being made to feel like they are part, that their victimness is what they need to focus on, and that's their fault in some way. Talk about how you feel. Talk about what you could do better next time. Why has our child asked that? That doesn't seem appropriate or fair. We're also asking for long-term observation in our 4th grade classes. This isn't something that happens one day on one particular thing, something that happens that's a definitive trigger. It's something that occurs that we can't describe. We can't set out and say, it's Tuesday, it's 3:05, the day's gone by, but we know in any second this is going to happen. That's not the case. The violence that occurs needs to be resolved. It needs to be observed. It needs your support, and that's what we're asking for.
Okay. Carly Karsten.
Hi, my name's Carly Karsten. I'm a Boulder parent, and I'm the co-founder of Community Immunity. So I'm here today to talk about, to advocate for immunization. So according to the Colorado Department of Public Health, in 2017, BVSD schools were on average 87% up to date on their immunizations. This is a telling number because it says that the vast majority of BVSD parents recognize the value of immunizations. But the number's still not high enough for herd immunity, for example, to measles. In order to protect these vulnerable kids who can't be immunized, we need a 95% immunization rate. Out of the 31 Colorado school districts with more than 5,000 students, we rank last for immunization rates. For comparison, Adams County and Cherry Creek have an average of 98% up to date. I know the board has so many responsibilities and competing demands, and the things we've heard tonight are really important. So sometimes immunization seems unimportant until one day when there's an outbreak, and then it becomes very important. I had the opportunity today to meet with several BVSD school nurses at the Boulder County Public Health Immunization Coalition meeting. And they were so enthusiastic and so competent and very committed. And I urged the board to support them in their efforts to comply with Colorado state laws. For BVSD to protect itself from liability and to prevent the enormous financial costs that accompany an outbreak, to prevent absenteeism, and most of all, to protect their students' health, I ask you to do what you can to ensure that BVSD students are immunized. Thanks very much for your time.
Okay, Teresa, okay. Seco-Share, and I apologize if I...
You became terribly close.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Teresa Seacott-Shearer. I am also a parent at Community Montessori, one of your focus schools in Boulder County, and I'm also an East County resident, as many of the families who come to Community Montessori are. And I'm just here to ask you to reconsider your decision about preschoolers available and space available in the buses. I'd like you to consider the environmental impact, like Teresa Anton did. I know 10 families who are now driving to school every day that used to take the bus because they have a preschooler and an older elementary school child. I'd also like you to consider the fact that enrollment is falling for 3- and 4-year-olds in Boulder County, and we are trying an attempt to pull from East County that is overflowing, and it's going to be a hard sell if we can't help them with transportation into Boulder. And lastly, slightly personally, I'd like you to consider how unjust it might feel to parents who pay full tuition and are tax-paying citizens not being given the same service as the reduced lunch children who, as preschoolers, are allowed a spot on the bus. Thank you.
Okay. Noemi Lastiri. Did I get the, Noemi Lastiri, Naomi? Okay. So Laura Corbin. Oops, nope, we already did that, okay. Okay, so that concludes our public participation. And now we'll move on to board comments. Board members, any comments? Who'd like to start? Okay, I would like to start then. Well, I just wanted to especially thank Isabel and Olivia for sharing your story tonight. It was so courageous, and I really appreciate your coming here and sharing that with the board this evening. And I just want to thank everyone for coming here and sharing your experiences. And I know that we'll be getting follow-ups from Dr. Anderson about several of the topics, and I'll follow up by email as well with him. And so those are my comments for this evening. Okay. Shelley?
So thank you for saying that, Tina. I was also going to say I'd like to follow up on some of the things we heard tonight. I'm sure that you have information you'd like to share with us, and so I'd be eager to hear that. Couple of more specific things, just regarding the topic of immunization. This has come up many times before the board, and I'd just like to remind the speaker that BVSD does not make immunization policy. The state of Colorado does, and under Colorado law, parents are allowed medical and philosophical exemptions. So now I'd really like to address the internet technology issue. I picked up the paper the other day to semi-headline about BVSD rolling out Chromebooks or the One-to-Web program in all of our middle schools. And I spent the next few minutes trying to recall when the board authorized that, and I really couldn't remember that happening. So that's concerning on a lot of levels, but what's especially concerning is that tonight we're hearing again about all the issues that come with that technology use and that we're not addressing adequately. So I would once again urge the board to slow down and get the supports and safety measures that we need in place before we continue to roll out technology in this district. we need to make sure we have the filters, an understanding of the screen time, all of the things that we've heard over and over again now for over a year. I think it's time to start taking that input extremely seriously. And I know that we're going to be having a work session on this in the fall, and we're reviewing our policies right now, and I think that's great. But I would hope in that whole process that we very seriously take the input that we're hearing tonight. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Donna?
I want to thank all of you for coming out and sharing your information with us, because it helps us have a pulse of what's happening in the schools. And as I saw you guys come and share your stories on bullying, I noticed the little stuffed animal. And I this week went with a friend to see the documentary about Mr. Rogers, and he talked about when TV came onto the landscape and how impactful that was, because the cartoon showed violence and kids getting hit in the face with pies. And he decided he would turn that around and be a lot different and address things. He said the most important thing we can do as adults, and I'm not promoting the movie, it just made me think of this, the most important thing we can do as adults is protect our children, whether that be with technology or with bullying or just their emotions. And I just want to make you guys know that that's my desire. When I went to the Fairview and Boulder High game this weekend, I went to a meeting before the game that was on internet, not internet, that was the security meeting. And I was amazed at how many of our staff volunteered their time to help make that event secure and safe for our children. And I think that's my goal, and that's our goal. And I appreciate your stories. Thank you for letting me share.
Richard?
I too want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and for the students that are at Aspen Creek, I want to thank you so much for your stories. The student conduct policy, as I'm reading it right now, I know you've probably read it too, and I really would like to know what we are doing in that particular regard, Rob. And maybe we can get that information back as soon as possible on that one. The liability waiver, I'm not sure I really truly understand what you're talking about, but I want to know more about that in terms of what that would be. And then also this FERPA designated school official, if you could enlighten us on that too, because I don't know who that particular individual is either, or if there, in fact we have one. For the Nederland parents, I really do think that we need to take a real close look at what's going on in Nederland, and I'm sure you have something to report back to us on that too. So, but I want to thank everyone for your participation here with us tonight.
Okay. Other comments? Kitty?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what other people have said about hearing from you all. I'm very concerned about school safety in Nederland and then at Aspen PK8 as well. So thank you for sharing that, and especially thank you to the Blake sisters for being courageous enough to speak to us. It's always good to hear from kids, regardless of what the content is. I agree with Shelley on concerns about technology, that we are going faster than we need to be, because I don't think we know entirely what is in best interests of kids yet. And I also then want to thank Ms. Carson for coming up and speaking about the importance of vaccinations to keep all of our kids healthy.
Okay. Kathy?
I'll add my thanks to Olivia and Isabel for coming forward. I think that takes a lot of bravery and courage to do that, and to their mom and everyone for bringing forward these stories. And I don't have much to add other than we'll look forward to reports back on how this has been addressed. And then on a couple of things that haven't yet been raised, I just want to say thank you to all of our staff in BVSD for what was the headline in today's camera about our achievement. I think I was going to look it up and I didn't, but I think we're one of the first districts of this size to achieve that status. It's important. It doesn't mean we don't have significant work to do, because we still have significant opportunity and achievement gaps, but it's nice to get a pat on the back every now and then. And so thank you to staff, all of staff, because I believe it's really a community effort to achieve such a thing. And then I'm going to shorten up what I wrote. I haven't ever done this before, but I actually wrote up my comments because I was so upset when I read what the Daily Camera put about a letter that Summit sent to all of its parents last week. And I haven't seen the letter. I don't think I want to see the letter. But what the Daily Camera reported that the letter said was, quote, recent discussions with BVSD suggest the district plans to reduce the high school's operating budget below the current funding levels provided to the Summit Middle School. Goes on to say the Board of Education is providing no assurance about the security of the mill levy funding that charter schools have historically received, and the implication of that was that we are looking at the Summit Academy application, and there have been some hiccups in that, and that those are the responsibility of the board. And I just want to say that those kinds of misstatements and inaccurate factual statements don't really help in the conversation and don't help with the collegial and really positive relationship that I think we've had with our charter schools. I'm hopeful that we can continue this positive relationship, but I am concerned that such inaccurate letters to families doesn't further this objective. Summit's received bond funds from both of our bonds, and with the last bond, they were one of the first schools to receive funding, and they received approximately $11,727,000, including community contributions of over $1 million. By comparison, Justice is scheduled to receive $260,000 from the bond, and Boulder Prep $352,000. So we've been more than fair to them when it comes to sharing our bond money. While I've been on the board, we've never ever talked about reducing PPR to the charter schools. In fact, I think we give them 100% of the PPR that we receive from the state. The discussion came about because of the statute that the legislature passed on mill levy override dollars. And I believe, I've studied school finance for a long time, that without exception almost, differentiated funding is necessary to help all our students achieve their full potential. And our current school finance formula supports that. The latest proposal supports that. We have 56 schools in BVSD. 54 of them support all our students financially. There are only 2 that did not, and those are 2 of our charter schools, Summit and Peak to Peak. So I will continue to advocate for additional funding following our students who need additional support, as I believe this is supported by the research and our own goals and objectives, including equitable funding. And I ask that the board and administration of Summit refrain from further misleading and inaccurate information, and look forward to a long-lasting and positive relationship going forward. So that's all I have to say.
Richard.
Clea, I want to also see if we can't look at the preschool transportation policy, what that is in terms of preschoolers getting transported to the preschool programs. And I know that there's policies that are put in place for reasons, but I also think that there's room for exceptions. And I think that you might want to look at what constitute an exception for individuals that are requesting some special assistance. I ran into a particular parent in Lafayette that, unfortunately for her and her family, she has cancer and she can't move around very much, and she's got to take her kids to school even though she was within that policy limitation in terms of having a bus come and pick her kids up. So she's also looking at some particular exception to policy so that she doesn't have to get up and take her kids to school and pick them up. And then the preschool program, because it isn't a 2.5-hour preschool program, that does create some problems for a lot of families that I know would like to have their kids in preschool, but because it's 2.5 hours, and then they have to come back and forth and picking up their kids. And if you have to drive 9 miles to bring your kid to school and then drive another mile to pick your kid up. I mean, it's a burden. So I think we need to look at our preschool program and see what we can do to either increase the time of preschool offering to a full-day preschool program as opposed to a half-day preschool program. I think that, some of those things that we need to look at.
Okay, Kathy.
I'll just echo a little bit about what Richard said on the transportation. I wasn't aware of that, and so I'd just like to get a little bit of follow-up on that, because I think that I don't know what the exceptions are, I don't know what the policy is, and so if we could get some follow-up on that, I think that would be really helpful. And I've already submitted a request to you on that earlier today, so.
Okay, Sam.
Sure. Just quickly, thank you, everybody, for coming out. It's really important that the public take advantage of the opportunity to talk to the board, and I'm glad you're here tonight to address us on multiple issues, many of which tie back to student safety. We say that is, and it is, our top concern, and so we appreciate you putting these issues on our radar. Rob, I would echo some of my colleagues' comments about some background on the Netherland Elementary situation would be appreciated. And Olivia, thank you so much for sharing your story. That took courage. Isabel, thank you for sticking up for your sister, too. It was really good to see you both here tonight. Thanks.
Okay, so why don't we move on to our first information item, unless any board members need a break. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back at 22, okay? Okay, we'll start up our meeting again, and we'll begin with an information item with the state test data review. Rob?
I'm excited to invite Jonathan Dings, our Executive Director of Student Assessments and Program Evaluation, to give the board and the public an update on our state test results. I think that you'll find that there's lots to be proud of and opportunities to get better. So with that, I will turn it over to Jonathan.
We awarded this, and this really is a lot of work that went into showing the kind of achievement and growth that leads to this kind of rating. Participation is now up to near the rates we see statewide. This was attributed to our Take the Test campaign and our great support from our community. By having students to take the test, and we've now reached to where we have 95% of elementary students participating, 90% of high school students based on the PSAT and the SAT, and 86% of middle school students. We do need to use some caution in interpreting results when we have a change in participation, and also when participation is low. So as you're looking at the results, know that we have slight questions about the middle level. We'd like to see even higher participation next year, and we'll be encouraging that. But in many ways, we think of this data, 2018, as our new baseline year for measuring future progress. An illustration of the changes in participation that we had in 2016-17, with each of these student icons here representing 400 folks, we had changes that involving essentially at the elementary and middle school reducing non-participation in half. At the high school level, we are also aided by having the PSAT come in at grade 9, which we believe has greater appeal to our students in terms of bearing on their post-secondary preparation. With these new results, we look at our achievement rate. And our achievement here, BVSD students do outscore the nation on national comparisons and Colorado by a large margin. With the PSAT and SAT, one of the ways you can look at the data is see how well our median student scores, and that is higher than 76% of students in a nationally representative version of that. On CMAS, math and English language arts, our students score 15 percentage points higher than what we see statewide in terms of meeting those challenging expectations that are set on the state's measures. In looking at achievement, we also have much better baseline data now in which to measure and monitor practice in narrowing gaps that we see. As we know, there is a significant disparity between overall achievement and for groups of students in terms of special education, free and reduced lunch, emerging bilinguals, and Latino students. As a way of looking at this achievement and the participation rate, and I'll zoom in a little bit now that you've seen the bigger picture and have this scope, right? The basic extent to which the blue 2018 dots are higher than the orange dots is an illustration that our participation rate was higher overall and for students in groups. This is data on the CMAS. Zooming in on this too, what we see is that we do have a significant gap between our overall performance and our performance of students in each of these groups. There are many ways to measure the achievement gap, but one way really is to just look at the difference in the percent of students meeting expectations overall versus Latino or free and reduced lunch. Turning to the growth data, this is how we have folks looking at it in our VisLabs system, and our point here, and I'll zoom in a minute on these icons. The darker blue ones represent English language arts. The lighter blue represent math. And what we see in grouping these to find a pattern in the data that's meaningful to us is that at the elementary grades, we see a very consistent pattern of growth that's higher than what we're seeing statewide in grade 4 and grade 5 on both English language arts and math. At the middle level is an area where we want to focus a bit more, showing that growth isn't quite as high as what we're seeing statewide, and with a similar pattern in English language arts and math. Our very best growth is some really remarkable growth at the high school level. In the blue column, the all blue column that I've just highlighted in red, that's the 2018 performance. And what we're seeing there is if those numbers were all 50, which is the kind of growth that you see statewide on average, they would be gray. If the growth is lower than 50, they'd be some shade of orange. But what you're seeing here is that for every group of students, for students overall, these are results that are above what we're seeing statewide. You see a similar kind of pattern in math, not quite as high as these very high figures that we're seeing that represent both growth at grade 11, right, where it was growth measured from the PSAT to the SAT, but also very high growth in measures that were from the CMAS to the PSAT compared against all other students statewide on that same measure. But again, we see growth, very good growth overall, and for all the groups I mentioned, outscoring the growth that we've seen statewide overall by a substantial margin and even a wider margin over students in those same same groups when the comparison is made horizontally there to the typically orange figures in the far right column. Now that we have this data, we will continue to make good use of it, and it's a focal point for working with our schools. This morning I met with elementary principals, last week with middle and high school principals, looking at the patterns in the data as far as achievement growth, and also some opportunity data, such as identification for special education services, attendance, and at the high school level, participation in advanced courses. We've also made this a focus of the Unified Improvement Plan strategies going on for all schools around database problem solving and decision making. Through our additional analyses of the data, this enables us to inform our practice and fundamentally and importantly, with our new solid baseline data, measure our future progress in narrowing gaps. This use of data will impact student success, and I'm so appreciative of our community for participating in our campaign, actively encouraging test participation, and now that we have the data, using it effectively. So in summary, we've talked a little bit about accreditation with distinction, our increased participation that enables us to have a new baseline for measuring future progress, high achievement, very strong growth at high school and strong growth at the elementary, the significant gaps we have in our efforts to work with data. We will have some ongoing efforts to encourage participation, and I stand ready for your questions.
Thank you, Jonathan, and congratulations on getting all this data. I know it must be exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah, you just seem like you're in a great mood. So, I actually am going to start with a question. We have information about the gaps from 3 through 8 in this presentation. How do we look at the gaps at the high school level where we have this high growth?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to look at gaps in multiple ways, right? And one of the ways I would choose to look at gaps is to talk about the kind of growth that we're seeing. We have a challenge here in that, on the one hand, all of our groups are making really good growth overall. On the other hand, the kind of growth that's being made doesn't close gaps between the overall performance, right, and the performance of students who are in special education, who are on for free and reduced lunch, who are emerging bilinguals, who are Latino. So we'll want to monitor this over time and take real actions to improve what we do. I think it is also worth looking at achievement. The PSAT and SAT provide us with measures on which we have students engaged and give us the ability to think about some of the metrics that we'll be putting into place over time, right? Some of the work that's coming into play now is the graduation guidelines work by the Colorado Department of Education. One of the ways that we will look at data will be not just by the average score on some of these measures, but by the percent of students meeting benchmarks in Colorado. So that data is coming and will be part of what we do too.
Okay, thank you. Questions, board members? Other questions? Richard?
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, I think we do have a little bit to celebrate in terms of where we're at overall. I'm looking at the achievement gap slide that you put up there between the Latino FRL, ELLs, and then the overall. Is it really a 30-point achievement gap that I'm looking at?
Yes, that's correct.
And I think my question is now for these particular groups, and in your presentation alludes to the fact that now we have more information now that will give us information on what we need to do, and then with these particular groups of students in terms of moving them up the scale to a better achievement rate. At what point are we going to hear what we're going to be doing with the data and how this will help improve the achievement of your Latino, your FRLs, and your ELLs, and your IEPs?
So I'll take this one, Jonathan. I would say that I'm very encouraged by the growth of our subgroups, that our growth of our subgroups outgrew the statewide similar subgroups, right? The challenge is, as we look at the data, we have the ceiling and we have the floor, and both are rising. And for us to close the gaps, the ceiling has to raise faster. The floor has to raise faster than the ceiling. And so I think that through my 100-day plan, I'll be doing a lot of evaluating on where we're at. I know that the team has, in our UIP plans, has as Jonathan alluded to, looking at data cycles and using data to identify students' needs and bringing strategies along with that. I'm happy to give the board an update on that if you would like that. I would say long-term, though, our long-term strategy is we go through the 100-day plan and move into a strategic planning process. This needs to be a core tenet of what it is that we need to do. So I think we are doing some things today, and as we move into tomorrow, we want to certainly fine-tune those and hone those things in and make sure that we're looking at the research, looking at what's working within our district in the context of BVSD, to make sure that we're doing the right things for all kids.
Well, I've been in this district for a long time, and I guess I'm a little impatient, you know, because I've been hearing the same story year after year after year after year, and I'd like to really get to a point in terms of really what are we going to do? And I'm glad that you're on it in terms of the strategic plan and all of that. So the other thing that I had, Jonathan, is that in the paper, the newspaper, the Daily Camera, we also talked about Sanchez as being a turnaround school. What about the other schools? I mean, because we have red, orange, whatever, yellow, green, you know. Where are the other schools at? I'm talking about your schools that are impacted by free and reduced lunch kids and Latino kids and ELL kids.
Right. So, so most of our schools are at the performance level, including Columbine, which made some very big gains after having been on a priority improvement plan. So is Uni Hill. So most of our schools, actually, there are about four other ones that aren't on a performance plan, which is the highest type of plan. So we have seen a lot of we have seen a lot of positive outcomes there.
And go ahead, because the follow-up question that I have in terms of what you just said is, what is Uni Hill doing? What is Columbine doing that other schools can do and benefit from whatever they're doing? I mean, what's working for those schools?
So that's the right question to ask. And as we begin to move forward and we start thinking about strategic planning and what's working within the context of our district, it'd be those practices that we'd hope to be lifting up to see if we could scale those to other to the context of within other schools. But we can get the board a summary of all of the performance frameworks for all of our schools to answer your earliest question, and I'll make sure I provide the board that.
Thank you.
Okay, Kathy.
I echo what Richard said, but I'd like to focus on our IEPs because they have the largest achievement gap, and so I don't want to lose sight of that. That breaks my heart. They have some growth, but a 40% achievement gap for our students on IEPs, who often are our most at-risk students. I'd like to, if we could, see a particular focus in our plan as we go forward, how we plan to deal with that. I know it's underfunded at the state level, and we're challenged locally to deal with that, but I just would like to highlight that because it worries me when I see these scores for our students on IEPs. And then I have a quick question. We don't see anything in here about, and tell me if maybe we don't get these results yet, the 11th grade CMAS science. My understanding is we had very, very, very low participation on those. And are we going to address that, or what are we doing around that, and what did that look like?
All right. So this presentation, in the interest of being lean, focused on English language arts and math. If I were presenting to you results on science, I probably wouldn't show you results from grade 11 because with 30% of students participating, it's hard to generalize that to BVSD's performance as a whole.
And will we start a similar campaign to try to drive up the participation rates on that at some point? I know that'll be a spring issue. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that's worth a conversation, one I'd want to have with principals, certainly with schools, and understanding the value of that test and looking at the participation rates with our team.
Hey, Donna.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question on the IP students with significant needs that take a different version of the standardized tests. Is this included in the data, or how does that work?
So in fact, students' scores on the alternative measures,
Yes.
which are taken about by 1/2 of 1% or so of our students, that those are factored into the accreditation rating. So those scores aren't in this particular slide about the achievement gap, but they are part of our accountability measure.
Thank you.
Sam.
For the presentation, Jonathan, and I'm encouraged by the participation rates. I think that means we're honing in on what the appropriate assessments are, the appropriate amount of time for assessments, and that's good news. I'm always encouraged when we come out ahead of the state and the nation on growth rates, but I always want to know how we would compare to districts that are similar to ours, because of course this is a wide variety of schools, right, in the state and the nation, and we're a particular kind of fairly well-resourced school with a particular demographic. Is there any way to find a comparison for peer districts?
Yeah, so among the tools on the Colorado Department of Education website is one that enables a person to pick by size, pick by percent minority, percent free and reduced lunch, and percent English learners. I was going through that exercise a little bit, just looking at the other districts who are accredited with distinction. We show up as more diverse than they are and bigger. But with that, we can sort of back into the question. Overall, by these kind of measures of achievement, growth, and post-secondary outcomes, we are doing better than some districts that have the demographics that are perhaps more like ours. We can pick a few. It's how much we want to place in those few. We could pick, for example, Boulder is serving Fort Collins is a college town-oriented kind of a district, has some similarity to us. Douglas County has some similarity to us, but not our diversity. So there are a bunch of comparisons we can make. What I look for is just the level of growth that we see overall, and how well that's going. And in cases like we have here, where we need to look a little deeper to tell some kind of story, right? The middle data and the elementary data are really very different on CMAS, and the high school data are different than those. So I think there are multiple places to look.
Okay, other questions, board members? Okay.
I just want to caution us that this is just one set of data, and as we've heard from our parents earlier, that in evaluating how our schools are doing, that there's so much more we need to keep our eye on and making sure that our students are feeling safe and secure. And while this achievement data is wonderful, I just don't want to lose sight of all the other things that are important in our schools too.
It's very very small. I think those numbers are often single digit or in fact small.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
That's in terms of the numbers that we record by my recollection.
Any other questions? Okay. So we'll move on to action items, consent grouping, and I'm going to read the items. 7.1 personnel, 7.2 approval of minutes, August 14th, 2018 special meeting, 7.3 approval of minutes, August 14th, 2018 regular meeting, 7.4 approval of minutes, August 21st, 2018 special meeting, 7.5 third grade literacy adoption materials, 7.6 acceptance of donation, University Hill Elementary, 7.7 agreement for day placement educational services, Laredon, 7.8 approval of the purchase of a rotary lift, 7.9 network security audit, 7.10 resolution in support of a real estate contract between BVSD and the City and County of Broomfield, Northmore Estates property. 7.11 grant, food service, no student hungry weekend nutrition bag program, City of Boulder 18. 7.12 grant, food service, nutrition education, farm to school, City of Boulder 18. Okay, so are there any items that board members would like to pull from the consent grouping? Okay, hearing none, we need a motion to approve the items. Second by Kitty. Okay, any questions or discussion around the items? Clarification? Anything? Okay, hearing none, Laura, would you call the vote on the motion, please?
Benford? Fuqua?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Gebhardt?
Yes.
Marquis?
Yep.
Myers?
Yes.
Sargent?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so we'll move on to our action item, 8.1, which is a resolution in support of Amendment 73. Rob, did you want to provide some background, or maybe?
Yes, so as we discussed in our meeting on the 14th, we brought this forward for study. We made adjustments to the resolution based on the feedback that we'd received from the board. Staff's recommending the board take action on this item this evening. I know that we've answered several questions for the board in the form of an RFI and tried to communicate and clarify both sides of this issue for the board to consider. And we have Bill Sutter here who can give us some more context, and I think he has something he's even going to run through to even just give you some more information to inform your decision this evening.
So we have a brief slideshow here to walk through. This is a slideshow that's been put together and modified a little bit by us, but put together by CASB for use by districts around the state, so it's kind of a standardized format. So this is really to provide some background information and other information around Amendment 73. So this is, again, to back up and remind everyone that Initiative 93 was the signature gathering process to get onto the ballot. It was successful to get onto the ballot, and therefore it became Amendment 73 to raise $1.6 billion in additional sustainable revenue for school districts across the state. So again, a little more background. The coalition that was put together to put this question together, ballot measure together, was a wide variety of folks at the table. It's called the 2018 table. And folks that self-described said would often be at odds at the legislature over funding, and so the concept was to bring all the different groups together to try to come up with a funding measure that would provide resources sort of across the board for students in the state. So the goals around that: raise additional revenue for education, distribute those resources adequately and equitably across the state. Local benefit and local control was very important to this process, that it wasn't sort of dictated from the state level. And then also provide a structural fix for local revenue around property taxes that have been a challenge for the state. So this amendment creates what's called the Quality Public Education Fund, where the revenues from this tax increase go. And it's exempt from TABOR, so it does allow it to grow and not be part of the TABOR limits. Important component of it is that it's supplement, not supplant language in there, so it must be additional to what is in the general fund appropriations for P12 public education. And it is adjusted for inflation each year up to 5%, so there is a cap on that to at least prevent in the case of wild inflation not outstripping the rest of the state budget. So it does raise $1.6 billion through income tax and corporate tax changes. As far as the levels, it doesn't start until $150,000 in taxable income and above. And then it's a graduated income tax above that. So this is an important component for people to understand, is that, so it's just the portion between the numbers as they get larger that's taxed at the higher rate. So for example, from $150,000 to $200,000, only that $50,000 is taxed at that additional rate, not the amount below, and so on and so forth up the scale. It does bring some tax equity into the state's system. So this is just a representation of the percent of income that is paid in state and local taxes in Colorado. So higher income earners pay less of a percent of their taxes into state and local taxes. And so with Amendment 73, this sort of brings up the top end a little bit, but still has a lower downward slope at those higher income levels. C Corps are the general description of a C Corp would be one that is sort of interstate or international, so not S Corps, not limited liability, things like that. So it does raise the income tax from the current 4.63 up to 6%. The federal changes in income tax on those corporations, that drop was fairly significant as represented here. And so this brings the total tax impact up a little bit for those C Corps. The structural problem around property taxes as a result of the interplay between the Gallagher Amendment and Amendment 23, the Tabor Amendment, is that the residential rate has dropped significantly since 1982 when Gallagher went in place. And that mix where non-residential, so that's everything that's not residential, business, ranches, farms, things like that, has stayed fixed to maintain that 45%, 55% split that's required in Gallagher. So what this does is it freezes the residential rate at 7%, so a drop from what it currently is in 2018, but also drops the assessment rate on non-residential from 29 to 24, which provides some tax relief for business owners. This slide shows how those state share and local share of resources into K-12 education has shifted over the number of years since Gallagher went in place, and we have a pretty wide gap between that state and local share. So this will help prevent that local share from falling any further. So again, this is new revenue for local needs and keeping those decisions at the local level. So increasing base funding, full-day kindergarten and expanding early childhood education, expanding the definition of at-risk students for free and reduced lunch kids. So currently in the School Finance Act, only free lunch students are counted as an additional factor for funding. And then it significantly increases the dollars for special populations, special education, emerging bilinguals, and gifted and talented students. The mechanism by which Amendment 73 does this is through the categorical reimbursements that currently exist in statute. So this doesn't redefine the School Finance Act. That would be a legislative process, but this pushes dollars into those current existing buckets of dollars. So now we have some local impacts and considerations. So in Boulder Valley, since the Great Recession started, we're down over $250 million cumulative. We still have a shortfall of $23 million from the negative factor annual. This, under the current structure with that, those dollars going into those categorical buckets as they're currently defined, we would receive almost 50 million, 48.7 million. These are numbers based on CDE student counts, CDE percentages of how much we receive of current categorical dollars. So again, this is an estimate, but it's based on CDE data. The budget stabilization factor is currently $743 per student. This would raise $1,573 per student. So that amount of money, $48.7 million, would take 7 mills in property tax to raise that same amount. It's important to note that we do not have the ability to raise this amount of money locally, as we have already tapped many of our mill levy override options. So these are a couple of examples for somebody's particular situation. So the average income earner in Boulder County, so again, this is countywide information, it's not specific to Boulder Valley School District. We do share Boulder County with St. Vrain. But 99,755 with an average home value of 435,000. So under that scenario, somebody would see a property tax decrease on their property and no income tax. Certainly know that average is not what everybody is. So if you look at somebody with income of 200,000 and a home value of 550, there would be a slight increase in income taxes and then a slight decrease in property taxes. And then if there's business property on top of that, those business property taxes are even greater decrease. There's a calculator that's available on the Colorado School Finance Project website. Here it is, cosfp.org/impact calculator. And it allows any individual to go and put in what their income is, their home value, and then their street address, and it calculates the information based on where that address is, what the property taxes are, what the change in that would be, and then what the expected income tax is. So again, here's an example. There's 88% of Boulder tax filers, Boulder County tax filers, have income below 200,000. So this is 12% of the population, 200,000 or above. And so again, it shows, like was on that other slide, but this is what that calculator looks like. And then we have somebody who earns a little more money, has a higher home value, but also has business value, and what that impact would be. And so again, somebody can go in and put in their own information. So some considerations around BVSD specific. So this would result in a net outflow of dollars from Boulder County because Boulder County has an higher average or above average percent of taxpayers who earn over $200,000 a year compared to the rest of the state. There would be property tax savings based on that residential and non-residential property tax changes, or the assessment rate change. As I mentioned, the expected resources exceed resources available from current mill levy options. And the local options are unlikely to increase by legislative action. Currently, we're capped at 25% of total program funding that we can collect. We are at that maximum. There's not a lot of desire at the state level to increase those local options for generating local revenue. This does provide additional resources to close the achievement gap, improve student achievement, expand full-day kindergarten and preschool. So full-day kindergarten, for example, would not be required. It would still be optional, but any school that has it or student that attends full-day would be counted as a full-time student, and we would receive funding for that. Federal taxes have graduated income tax, so this sort of aligns with that federal structure. increases that equity and tax burden. Additional resources for all students, so this does not, seems to be that the legislative level, there's been a move towards creating more grant programs and specific allocations of resources, whereas this provides resources across the board for all students. There is long-term economic benefit for workforce development, and then long-term savings from early interventions through those full-day kindergarten and preschool options. So these arguments for and against, I won't read through all these, but again, this is information that'll be provided in the blue book that'll be sent to everybody, all voters, with arguments for and against this particular item. That is the end of that.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Board members, are there any questions or comments? Well,
Yes, I have a question.
okay.
Is the only source of revenue to pay for what's identified in here the increase in the income tax and the corporate tax? I mean, I'm guessing, I mean, it's not a likely scenario, but a scenario where inflation goes up and income doesn't go up and there's a requirement to pay what's identified in here. Is the only funding source then, would we have to go back to the general fund? I mean, that was one of the issues with 23, was there wasn't sufficient revenue identified to meet the mandates of the language, and so I'm just curious if this suffers from the same issue.
So part of that is, I would suggest is that 5% cap. So that does put some limiters on that, so that it can't grow too fast. So to have inflation growing but wages not at a significant rate, particularly on low income, I mean, because this is a high income tax structure. I'm not sure that we've seen that specifically. I would have to look into that as far as whether the economic trends tend to be low income wages stay stagnant while high income wages tend to go up.
And my only concern is just pressure on the general fund and if there's sufficient revenue in here to meet the mandates that are required in here, because we've seen that as one of the issues with 23. And you know, you think it through as best you can. It was just something I thought of when I was reading this through again.
Certainly there's, I think the legislature has some ability to manage that, but with that supplement not supplant, it becomes much more difficult for the legislature to do something contrary to what that is recommended.
And hence an impact on the general fund.
Okay. Comments or questions? Shelley?
So, Bill, you mentioned that this doesn't redefine the School Finance Act, and that's up to the legislature. Can you describe all the ways in which that could not work out well if they decided to redefine it after we pass this law?
So there are infinite scenarios where, I don't know about infinite, but lots of scenarios where resources could be redirected through a finance act that were so heavily burdened towards populations of students that Boulder does not have the state average in. The likelihood of that being able to pass is, I don't think, very high, because as Jonathan was discussing, there are other places in the state, Douglas County, Boulder, Cherry Creek, Littleton, Cheyenne Mountain, places that have similar demographics to us. So it's not like you can't put a Boulder Valley factor into the School Finance Act that would just negatively impact us. There would be too many other districts that would be impacted in the same way to have it be, I think, able to make it through the legislative process. That would be so negative that we wouldn't see anything out of this, so to speak.
What about just decreasing PPR? Could they do that?
No, that's constitutionally. Once the base is set, which is why some of this money was applied to the base. Once the base number is set, it can't be reduced.
Thanks.
Other questions, board members?
Well, I'll do a motion and we can.
Right,
So, I was just gonna move that we pass this resolution, and we could still have.
okey doke. And Donna? Yeah, we can go to discussion. yeah?
Okay, I didn't know if I wanted to discuss. So I don't go off on a tangent. I wrote some things after looking at the slides, and I thank you for answering the RFI I submitted. But, and I want everyone to know, I'm totally for helping our children, your children. I haven't, this isn't about me, but I want everyone to know that I get it. I can relate to our struggling children. I was one of 6 from a family that struggled. I really can empathize with those children who come to school each day aware of the lack of resources in the home. I want all children to have what they need so that they can move towards successful outcomes in life. With that said, I want voters to decide for themselves on Amendment 73. If I back this resolution, I'd be asking others to do the same, yet I think it needs better wording. To me, at first glance, Amendment 73 and the resolution to support it sounds great. Money for preschool, for full-day kindergarten, for English language learners, for free and reduced lunch students. But in doing a careful reading, and I spent a lot of time on this, I saw in Section 4, 22.5.109.3, page 3, if you want to look at it yourself, it points out that school districts are not required to spend these monies as stated in the amendment. I also believe that even though it stated that 90 or 88% of the people will not be impacted, that's not a good standalone reason for someone to support it. I believe that all the people will absorb some of this economic impact. As corporations are taxed, they will in turn pass their impact to the consumer by increasing the cost of goods and services. So to me, in the end, we will all absorb some of the cost. I want to see an amendment written so that the money will, not may, and that's, I ask for the difference between may and shall, be used as we want and desire it to be used. Past amendments have not provided the resources that were expected due to loopholes being found so that the money could be used in other ways. I've decided to abstain from voting on this. I am not comfortable with the current initiative. It does not have enough guarantees in it, and I feel the resolution would commit this board and future boards to something that has not been fully studied or the consequences and trade-offs analyzed. Let it be clear, though, that I want districts to have these funds, and notwithstanding my concerns about the wording of the amendment, I will diligently work to ensure that these funds, if received, are spent in accordance with the intent behind 73.
Okay, other comments, board members? Shelley?
A point of order, question. To abstain, do you have to have, can you abstain? What are the reasons that you can abstain? I'm not clear on those.
And I just read my good cause. That's to yes or no, then.
What does good cause mean, Melissa? Well, generally, abstention relates to conflict of interest or something like that. I mean, it sounds like the cause is part of the discussion about the yes or no vote. That's not typically what I would say would be good cause. It's usually some factor that would raise a conflict.
So you can't just have a philosophical objection to voting yes or no to something? That's not a good cause?
That's typically, I mean, this is the board's policy, but.
And procedurally, would we need to do a motion to excuse her? I mean, how would that work procedurally? I just don't even know.
Yeah, I think if the board needed to make a finding about good cause, then we'd need a motion to
to consider that.
And then if we did that, would this motion set a precedent for the future in terms of what constitutes good cause?
Could. I mean, I feel like the board changes over time, and every board gets to make an independent decision on that, the motion before it at that time.
Well,
Or rather than abstention, you can vote negative on it and then state why you're voting negative on it, which would serve the same purpose.
I could, but I don't think many people go back and review the tape. They just see the yes or the no's, and that was my reasoning for wanting to give my statement on why I needed to and wanted to.
So what would a motion look like if we wanted to say, in this case, we allow somebody to abstain?
Well, I would think that somebody would move to allow Donna Meyer to abstain because she's articulated good cause for abstention, something like that.
Okay, I would be willing to make that motion. Can you write that down, Melissa?
A second.
Can Donna vote on that motion?
You got that, Laura?
And now is there discussion on that motion? Okay, and I guess I'll ask Donna. So do you have a conflict? Is there something that you need to share, or?
I don't have a conflict. I think the wording needs to be more clear. It's not a conflict of interest. It's not. I totally understand. I come from a struggling background. I'm not struggling now. And I just don't think that it's clear to many of our voters when they look at this. They think, and some people have said, yes, I'll get full-day kindergarten. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It doesn't necessarily mean that every group of student listed here will get those funds.
Okay. It sounds like a no vote, which would be an absolutely fine vote, I think, for that rationale. The way I'm interpreting the policy, I'm a little confused what makes good cause. So
So I think, aren't you saying, Donna, that you're afraid that your no vote will go out there publicly, and people won't understand that you really are for more funding? It's just the wording of this bill that bothers you?
I like the way you said that. Yes, that is exactly my point. And a no, sometimes people look at it as this person voted no. They're not for having more funds for these students and these populations. Yet I am, but not in the way it's worded here. So you guys can choose to shoot that down and say no. You have to vote yes or no, and I will.
And with all due respect, I feel like we vote like that so frequently. There are so many times we vote no for a unique reason that may not be transparent to the public, and I guess we have to trust our community to do some reading and background. I'm not crazy about voting no on this motion, but I think I probably will, only because we do this all the time. This is the nature of our voting. But that being said, I understand the frustration, and I think we all experience it, because sometimes that's all we're reduced to, but that's of course our job. But anyway, yeah.
I think you raised some really interesting points, Donna, that I hadn't thought of, but I tend to concur with what Tina said. I don't want you to believe when the vote comes that I'm forcing you to do anything, because I want the collegiality to continue, and so I don't want you to feel like that's where we are. I just am struggling with the whole idea of, I've always thought of it, which is why I raised the question, that it's a true conflict and not the fear that the public might misinterpret a vote that we make as good cause. And so I just wanted to reach out to you, because I don't want it to be misconstrued any more than just a single vote on this. And I really appreciate what you brought forward and the heartfelt information that you brought forward, because I didn't know some of that background. So thank you for sharing that.
I won't take offense at all. I'm not that way, but this is what I would prefer to do.
I think this is one of those times where an exception to the policy in favor of supporting a board member who's stated her perspective pretty clearly is in order. So I would definitely support this motion.
Other comments or thoughts? Kitty?
Yeah, I agree with Tina, just that, you know, it does sound to me like it's a no vote, and you explained very clearly why, and that was very articulate, and we can't help what the community decides to pay attention to and decides not to. I mean, I voted no, and I was the only one on Summit, and I stated my reasons for it, and I don't know if anybody looked into that or if they thought I just hate Summit or, you know, and frankly, I don't care as long as I've put my position out there and people can find it. But the concern I have with abstaining is that we're going to set a precedent that if you are not in favor of something but you're not against it in principle, then we can all just abstain, and then we don't ever go on the record voting. I think an abstention really should be for something like a conflict of interest. So that's my opinion.
I really believe that people can have philosophical conflicts of interest. And if it's a philosophical conflict of interest, I support your.
Okay.
I just also like to say, I don't think there'll be a rash of abstaining after we, if we decide to do this. In fact, I can't remember a time when
Yeah.
anyone's abstained, so.
I remember one time it was during one.
Conflict,
Yeah, but it
yeah.
was Kitty?
So I have a question for Richard. What is a philosophical conflict of interest?
Donna just stated it.
Well, it sounded more like objections to the amendment itself. I mean, I don't understand the concept of a philosophical conflict of interest. I mean, if you have a personal philosophy, you adhere to it in your voting.
Well, I thought I heard that she has that particular, she understands the fact that this money is going to go to a good cause. However, she stated, and I believe, I don't know whether philosophically or not, the reasons why she can't support it, period. So I don't want to debate with you what philosophical conflict of interest is. Okay.
I feel like we have a suggestion for a CASB session, which might talk about when abstention is appropriate and when not. So Kathy, if you could take that back to the CASB board. All right. Yeah, this is a tough one. Sam, do you have any thoughts? No. Okay. No. All right. Okay. All right. So should we? So we have a motion to allow Donna to abstain. Should we call the vote? Should we call the roll on the motion? All right. Is everyone okay? Is everyone ready? All right.
The motion on the table is to allow Donna Myers to abstain from voting because of good cause. Benford,
Yes.
Fuqua,
No.
Garcia. Yes. Gebhardt. No. Marquis,
No.
Myers. Sargent.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay. And in all seriousness, I'm sorry. This is a tough one. So. You are charting new territory without question. I hope this isn't forever on an island. And where are we going? Okay.
We have some more discussion here.
Did you want more discussion? Sure. Do you want to start it out?
On the main topic.
On 73, whether or not to, yeah.
Yeah. So I just think there are parts of this initiative that I really like, and I definitely feel like it's better than Amendment 66, which was also recommended to us by staff to approve. I think that there are a lot of schools in Colorado that really need more funding, especially rural districts. And I also think that school funding is likely to erode over time, and that so something needs to be done differently, I think, you know, in order for our most disadvantaged districts to get what they need. But what makes me uncomfortable with this initiative in particular is because there aren't any guarantees that this $1.6 billion will be spent the way that it's advertised that it will be spent. And I think that these things are so complicated that voters don't always understand that. They don't spend hours poring over the language and discerning between mays and shalls and, all the ins and outs of these bills. And but those loopholes are always built into them, and I think they're built into this one as well. I'm also concerned that Boulder's contribution far exceeds what's coming back to it. I understand why that's the case. I think it's another situation where when you understand how this all works, you would fully expect that Boulder wouldn't be getting back what it's putting out. But I don't think the voters would understand that, and I don't think the voters would be okay with that. And I don't think that outflow is going to be described in the Blue Book when they sit down to vote. And so I think that when voters have all the information they need to make this decision, they're going to make the right decision for them. And I don't feel really right urging them to do that without them having that information. So I guess I'd rather have them make up their own minds rather than me going out there and trying to influence them when I'm not sure what the right thing to do in this situation is. And I would feel a little bit like I was misleading them because I don't think they know what they need to know. And maybe we could make an effort to educate them between now and the ballot, between now and November. And I would advocate for that. But right now, the way the resolution stands, and without that information out there, I would vote no on this.
Okay, other comments? Kitty?
Yeah, Shelley, I thought about exactly what you said about the outflow being more than the inflow. But then I realized we're talking about an income tax. We're not talking about a property tax or something, a mill levy, anything that's going to stay in district. All of our income taxes flow out. We pay more than we get back, and that's just how they work. So I don't have a problem with that because of it being an income tax. And further about the income tax, one of the things I really like about it is that it makes it much more equitable. I was looking at that, and, I pay a much bigger percentage of my income in taxes than people who make, orders of magnitude more than I do. And I do like the idea of having that part be a little more equalized. I think that makes it more fair. And also, I don't think it's possible to write an amendment like this that's not going to have a problem with it. I mean, we saw, 66 had a lot of problems. We didn't pass it. 23 had a lot of problems. We did pass it, regardless of the problems, because we knew we needed more money. So I'm going to support this. I think we can also let our community know what we plan to do. I think we as a board can say, if you pass this, here's what we will do with the money. We can say, if we want to, that we'll give you full-time kindergarten. I know the community really wants it. We can say we'll put more money into TAG, into all of the things that are outlined in here. I don't think we need to leave it a mystery for our voters. So for those reasons and others, I'm going to support this.
Okay, other comments? Kathy?
I just have a question for you, Rob, and maybe for staff. The last sentence says, the board authorizes expenditure of district funds to distribute a factual summary. I personally am not comfortable with the factual summary we have in here showing that we'd get $49 million. I think our factual summary needs to be very vague, given the board concerns that we have. And so I don't know if we'll get a chance to look at what that factual summary is before it goes out. I always get nervous about overselling and then being accountable for something that we don't have any control over. So that sentence makes me really nervous, and I hope we get some feedback on how that would look.
And we can certainly work with staff, and Bill, you wanted to chime in?
Real quick, so that the summary that CASB put together that's attached to the agenda item which is made in the same structure for every district in the state, is not, it is a, but not necessarily the factual summary. So whatever we want to put together, and certainly clear that by the board, it can look in whatever format we want it to. We're not stuck with that particular one.
Other comments?
Kitty, I'd just like to respond that, my main issue isn't really that certain people are going to be taxed more. That's not my main concern. I think a lot of people would be willing to be taxed more to help our schools, but I just feel like that's their decision and they should know about the disparity in where the money's going. Because a lot of times we've asked our voters to, vote for various bond issues and mill levies, and they've always known that that money was going into their district. And I think that probably they would think that that's the same case here. So unless that was really truly explained in a blue book or in some communication by the district or something, I feel like, go ahead, Rob, are you saying it? Oh, okay. I just feel like it's a little bit, misleading's too strong, but I think they won't understand it. And I don't feel like that's the way to, I don't think we should encourage voters to vote for something that they don't truly understand. So that's my main point with this. And then I also have concerns about what Bill said about the legislature later just shifting everything around in ways that we didn't expect. So,
Other comments? Sam, you want to pipe in, or?
I'll support the resolution. I take your point, Shelley, but I think we will do our best to educate voters on the pros and potential cons of it. It's a representative democracy. If the legislature mucks with it, we have an option there, and they might. And I think in terms of more money going out than coming in, I think this strikes a good balance. I mean, we do get a significant amount of school funding back that we can invest in our kids. If it's a net outflow, then that's, I'm okay with that in terms of the investment for the common good of educating the kids all across the state. I get your point, though.
Okay, any other comments? All right, Laura, do you want to call the vote?
The motion on the table is to approve the resolution in support of Amendment 73. Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Myers.
No.
Sargent.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. All right, so our next item is agenda setting. And I heard one agenda setting item from Richard around preschool. Do we have that on? Preschool transportation. So if we could add that to our running list. Sorry, my computer just went to sleep, so I have to wake it back up. Okay. What other items? What's that, Donna?
I was just saying.
Oh. Okay. Kathy?
So Shelley, I brought this up at the last board meeting because I share your same concern about legislature mucking with this. And so what I had proposed back then was passing a resolution to help have CASB work with us to make sure that that doesn't happen if this passes. So I have some proposed language that I would just float by you to see if you like it, and we could direct CASB to put it into the delegate assembly and see if it passes, because I think there's no end of the mischief that the legislature could do if this should pass. And I tried to keep it really broad. So the language that I have is the Colorado Association of School Boards, and I can get you a copy of this if you want, but it's just to put on as an agenda item for us to talk about later, but I was curious if anybody thought this was a good idea. Recognizes that a structural change is needed in how the state distributes the resources for pre-K-12 public education. This should be driven through a new Public School Finance Act, and we would support actively advocating for the adoption of a School Finance Act that equitably distributes resources to all 178 school districts in Colorado so that we don't get singled out was something that would not be called the Boulder factor, but would actually look like the Boulder factor, because what I've heard is there was angst at the last session about our mill levies and wanting to reduce the state share to make up for the mill levy that we get, and so, and we are in a unique position because we've passed more mill levies, I think, than almost any other district, so you could see some of that happening. So it was just a question. We've never engaged that I know of while I've been here and sending anything to the delegate assembly, so I just wanted to put that as an agenda item because we haven't talked about that, so.
Okay, so, and based on our last retreat, this is a great question. How do we get that on the agenda? So do we all need to give a nod of heads that we'd be willing to discuss such a resolution for CASB, or what would we do? What do you suggest, Rob? Right.
So at our retreat, we spoke about the prioritization of items. I mean, I would say that this is something that's more timely. So because of the timeliness of nature, I think if I got clear direction from the board, that we could try to bring this forward on the next agenda, but I would just need that direction.
Okay. And is that something we can do through a nod of heads? Are people more or less okay with having a discussion about the language Kathy would like to take to the CASB resolutions meeting, I think it's called? No, that we need to get board, we need to be behind it. We don't, so in general, we've never sent people to CASB without getting the support of the board prior. So that's how we've done it in the past.
We could give them general direction, Donna, but we, at some point, need to actually agree on what it is that we said. So, I don't know. Since we haven't done it and I wasn't sure how to bring this forward, this was my apparently not very eloquent attempt at trying to bring it forward.
Shelley, got a comment?
Well, I mean, I have to read it because listening's not the same, but it sounds to me that what you've written, I mean, the definition of equitable could be a little scary and I understand your intent, but I think it could be taken exactly the opposite way. So I think we'd really have to focus on the language pretty clearly to make sure it met our objectives.
And I think it'd be a worthwhile discussion, even if we don't get it to CASB, as to how to give our lobbyists direction. But I guess what we're trying to figure out is this something that should be an agenda item going forward?
Thoughts?
Is it going to displace anything that's on the priority list already?
I don't think so. Doesn't require staff support, so it's a little different. Is everyone okay with seeing this on the agenda next time? Okay, great. Okay, what else do we have? Kitty?
Well, I know it's not on here, but one thing I would like to see us do is to come to at least general consensus on what are we going to do with this money if we get it. And I know we can't say specifically because we don't know exactly how much we'll get, but we can say, this is our first priority for this money. Here's our second priority. So people will at least know what they can expect from us if this amendment passes.
Okay, so how would we go about that? Would that be a work session or something from staff that we would respond to?
I do think that we have, depending upon the timeliness of when we would need that, we do have some time built into kind of our annual plan that we discussed at our retreat to talk about budget process. And we could work at maybe having that conversation at that point. I'd have to look to Laura to see when our next meeting would be on budget process. 25th of, so the 25th of September, so we could potentially talk about that then, if that would meet the needs.
Maybe, and Kitty, just to clarify, are you thinking about this as a way to communicate to voters what might be the uses?
Yes.
Okay, so we may want to move it up if possible, but I don't know, what do you all think? Shelley? Look like you have something on your mind.
The question is, what's the board going to decide to do and then how to communicate that to the voters?
I would think in a very general term.
Well, I think that's a good idea, and I also think that we need to communicate to the voters exactly what they're voting for. If we're going out there with a spiel on what we're spending, I think they should know what's happening with their money.
So that's why I raised the question about the factual information that we send out as a district. So I agree with you that we need to move that up before the 25th.
Okay, so are we giving direction as a board that we want to create some time in the next couple weeks to talk about this? Is everyone comfortable with that? No? Okay, great. Okay,
So to clarify,
yeah.
to make sure I understand the direction, that Laura will work together to try to find a work session time within the next couple of weeks where we could meet to maybe have this discussion as a board.
That's good.
Am I clear?
Sounds right.
Okay.
And we also need to find work session time for a legislative dinner in the next couple months, usually first week of December. Is that right, or is it earlier?
They wanted to avoid being too close to Christmas, to the
Okay.
holiday season. Last year, I want to say it was December 18th or 19th, and they felt that that was too early, or too close to the holiday season. And you have to wait until after the election.
Right.
So we've got a period of about 5 weeks in there where we need to get this in. And we do have some items proposed to be on the agenda for many of those work sessions. Possibly entertain an additional work session on a Tuesday evening.
Okay. Okay. Let's find the time. I think it's important for us to have that meeting. Okay, what else? Shelley?
So I know that we're discussing this technology thing. Is there actually a work session on for that, or is it just a board public participation and a vote on the policies?
On the
There's-
JS?
Well, in general on technology.
Okay.
Was there a work session
Well,
on
I thought I
technology?
saw on the calendar during the retreat that there was a work session.
That's
Is
what
that-
I'm asking, I guess. Is there actually a work
Yeah,
session?
that's what we had planned, yes.
Okay.
To have a district technology philosophy, and then also to discuss JS and GBE.
Okay, great, thanks.
But are those together, or are they separate?
As it stands today, we have them both in one
Okay.
meeting, one work
Great.
session.
Okay.
And I think that we looked at the dates and we wanted to make sure we didn't have it the week after Christmas or
Giving.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Right, so we were looking to move,
Move
the
it
day after
forward.
Christmas we might not have people here, but, and so we were gonna move it forward.
Yeah, okay.
That was what we're working on.
Okay, Kitty?
And I have a question on that. Are we going to make time to hear from the local, national experts on this? I know Shelley had a chance to meet with them. I didn't. I don't know if anyone else did. But I think it would be important to hear from them.
One option is you can meet with them.
No, but I mean, to make sure everybody hears from them.
Okay.
I worry about selecting certain people to come and present, so I don't know how we decide that. So I would be fine meeting with them individually, and they can come and present during public comment, but I worry about the precedent that would set.
So if we did want to bring these people, since they are national experts and they're right in our backyard, would we need to make a motion to bring them here?
I think that's a great question. So I don't know, and I think, is that probably the best way to handle this?
So I do think that as we begin to evaluate where we are with our district's technology philosophy, with policies, that we do need to be considerate of what the research says, national experts certainly being part of that. What I can do is work for a timeline, because we're gonna have to be doing work prior to that work session as well. And I can share that proposal with the board to consider that. And if the board would want to, as part of that timeline, bring in experts to share with the board, I think that could be something to consider. But I would say that we need to have a timeline of information and things that we're looking at prior to that meeting.
Okay, and when would we get that timeline, do you think, more or less?
I can probably get it, probably not this Friday, but if you give me till next Friday, I can get that to you all. Does that work for everyone?
Great.
Okay, great. What else? Okay, well, with that, I'd like to adjourn our meeting.